This is a life-giving service, whether it is in joy or in sorrow. We recognize that we all come from different places in our journey of remembrance. Of the persons we will remember today, some deaths were premature, while others came after a full life. So I invite you to enter this time in this space and this remembering as you're able, and may God's Spirit bring to mind and to heart that which we need in this hour and in the hours to come.
I'm reading John O'Donoghue's blessing entitled For Grief from his book, To Bless the Space Between Us. When you lose someone you love, your life becomes strange. The ground beneath you becomes fragile. Your thoughts make your eyes unsure, and some dead echo drags your voice down where words have no confidence. Your heart has grown heavy with loss, and though this loss has wounded others too, no one knows what has been taken from you when the silence of absence deepens. Flickers of guilt kindle regret for all that was left unsaid or undone. There are days when you wake up happy, again inside the fullness of life, until the moment breaks and you are thrown back onto the black tide of loss. Days when you have your heart back, you are able to function well, until in the middle of work or encounter, suddenly with no warning, you are ambushed by grief. It becomes hard to trust yourself. All you can depend on now is that sorrow will remain faithful to itself. More than you, it knows its way and will find the right time to pull and pull the rope of grief until that coiled hill of tears has reduced to its last drop. Gradually, you will learn acquaintance with the invisible form of your departed. And when the work of grief is done, the wound of loss will heal, and you will have learned to wean your eyes from that gap in the air and be able to enter the heart in your soul where your loved one has awaited your return all the time. I met someone 3 years ago at Doc's 2009 homecoming event whose grief story intersected with mine. That serendipitous encounter, which acted as an ignition switch for me, and subsequent providential alignments and connections have brought us to this event today, which I hope will be for each of us, whatever our reasons for being here, a safe, welcoming place to continue to process difficult griefs and losses that have touched all of our lives. Some of us are here today to recall and celebrate the lives of the 8 students who died while still enrolled at Doc, and or the 2 more who left us less than a year after graduation. Others of us have said premature, unexpected goodbyes to family members and friends years earlier, way too soon. More than 100 Doc alums and friends have died in the school's less than 60-year history. Today, we celebrate all of their lives as we seek to grieve well and to remember them well. So whether you are commemorating a recent or long-ago loss of someone you love, someone connected to Doc or not, or perhaps the loss of a job or a home, a relationship or a dream, good health or even a companion animal, we hope you can find space in today's events to continue to grieve your loss with others on the journey, and perhaps begin as well to rejoice in the green shoots of redemption that have become apparent along the way. In the process of managing my own grief over the years, I have learned, as a long-to-read survivor, that our lives take on new trajectories when pain and heartache intervene. In the words of one author, we are forever changed after a major loss. We cannot expect to be the same persons any longer. If people ask when we'll be our old selves again, we need to let them know that a new self is emerging. We may not begin to know for a very long time who that new self is, but we will gradually live into the answer. Even as we are changed by loss, we also have been changed by a profound love that lives within us still. As a grief blogger I follow observes, the excruciating pain of unexpected death doesn't hurt for just a few days, or weeks, or months, or even a few years. The impact of a major loss is lifelong. Emotional closure is a cultural myth. No matter how many years go by, 10, 20, 30, and for a few of us 50, we continue to remember. Some of us may think of those lost to us almost daily, or continue to experience occasional surprisingly painful days even many years after the fact. For most, though, the ache will soften and ease over time. But normal grief typically results, even many years later, in moments of reoccurring sharp pangs as raw as that very first day. And just when it seems that we are now too familiar with only pain and sorrow and suffering, my blogger acquaintance reports that we find as time goes by, and with our own intention, that we are changing in a way that welcomes tenderness, that bears witness and wisdom and compassion. Eventually, as we come into contact with others along the way who have suffered what we have suffered, who have lost as we have lost, we find ourselves able to companion and be with in ways that would not have been possible had we not experienced similar loss. As one of you out there today put it, we discover somewhere along the way that we have learned these many years later to hold the losses in a good balance / tension with the ongoing joys in our lives. Friends of mine have reminded me that even as I tend in this moment today, too long ago, grief as a present-day 66-year-old, I also would do well to tend to the 16-year-old me who lost a boyfriend tragically, and the 28-year-old who buried an 18-year-old brother with my family 38 years ago yesterday. We've placed an empty chair here so that each of you might visualize yourself in that seat as a 10-year-old who lost a beloved brother, or the 18-year-old who lost a best friend, or the 40 or 50-something parents who said goodbye to their youngest child, or the empty nester who lost a spouse prematurely. Whatever your story is, take a moment of quiet reflection now to recall the person you were at the time your beloved departed. A few folks here today will share briefly from their stories of grief and loss and their experience of green shoots of redemption and the rainbows of promise God has placed in their lives at the garden dedication to follow. But we hope all of you will take time to share a bit of your story with someone that you read here today. Where have you noticed rainbows after the storm? We trust that exposing our grief journeys to others and exchanging stories of those we have loved and lost can become a step in the healing process. I love resources and confess to being a modest but chronic collector and repackager of the wisdom of others. Listen to these gems about grief and loss from folks you know and some you've probably never heard of. Rumi reminds us that the wound is the place where the light enters you. A Turkish proverb proclaims, "He that conceals his grief finds no remedy for it." William Shakespeare writes this in Macbeth, "Give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak knits up the overwrought heart and bids it break." Jesus says in Matthew 5:4, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." And here's a vote for sharing your painful story from a 19th century French poet-writer. Grief knits two hearts together in closer bonds than happiness ever can, and common sufferings are far stronger links than common joys. Our own 19th century American writer-essayist Washington Irving had this to say about tears, with which grieving folks are all too familiar. There is a sacredness in tears. They are not the mark of weakness, but the mark of power. They speak more eloquently than 10,000 tongues. They are the messengers of overwhelming grief and unspeakable love. Finally, I want to share with you a passage from my favorite author, Sue Monk Kidd's book entitled When the Heart Waits. She says, When the true self breaks through, a new and impassioned approach to life also often makes itself known. We tap into an inner radiance that I call delight. I'm speaking of a unique kind of response to life that can coexist with our most painful realities. Monk Kidd goes on to say that delight comes by way of scars. One of her favorite stories is the variation of an old tale that circulated through New England in the 19th century. An insect egg was deposited into an apple tree on a farm in Connecticut. One day, the tree was struck by lightning and fell to the ground. The farmer took the apple wood and made it into a table, which sat in the kitchen for many years. One day, he heard a strange sound like gnawing coming from the wood. It kept up for weeks until finally a beautiful winged bug emerged through a scar in the table, opened its wings, and flew above the kitchen in a little dance of joy, delighting, it seemed, in the long-awaited experience of being alive. Delight comes that way, says Sue Monk Kidd. Wound, waiting, and finally wings. Delight gnaws out through the scar. May you find a way today and in days to come to realize that you are forever changed by loss, to share your grief as you are able, to cry if you like, and perhaps even to find delight, gnawing its way out of past pain. Above all, may you discover O'Donoghue's heart in the soul, where your loved one